Good morning. Happy Friday. So, yesterday I mentioned Robin Williams, and that's a great example of self communication. We talk a lot about internal dialogue, asking morning questions, the power of focus. Wherever focus goes, energy flows. Well, Robin Williams, Jim Belushi, Elizabeth Taylor, Chris Farley. These are all examples of people who mastered communication with everybody else, but not with themselves. And Robin Williams is maybe the greatest example. I mean, we all adored Jim Belushi, and Elizabeth Taylor had her fans, but Robin Williams was just a guy that was just loved by everybody all over the world. And in every walk of life and in every area, and talk about a guy that was successful. He started out, and he was with a group of comedians that hit Sunset Boulevard, and it was Billy Crystal and Jay Leno and all these guys. And Jay Leno will talk about how they all were trying to figure out who was going to make it and who wasn't going to make it. There's always this new wave of comedians and who's going to get there. And Leno said he thought Billy Crystal would make it because he had a lot of stuff, and Leno was like, I hope that I would make it. But he goes, we all knew that Robin was going to make it. And Billy Crystal, the first time he saw Robin Williams do stand-up comedy, he looked at himself and he was like, I might be the right guy at the exact wrong time, because Robin was doing everything that was so unique. Nobody else had done anything like that, and it just blew everybody out of the water. So it wasn't long, and he had his own show, and I mean, that's kind of the goal of every stand-up comedian is you get your own show. Well, Robin did that, within the first couple of years. He's on Mork and Mindy, so he decides, I'm going to do it all. I'm going to be in movies. I'm going to, so he does that. Then he decides, I want to win an Academy Award for not being funny. He does that. He wants to be in theater. He does that. He does the big stadium tours. He does it all. But at the end of the day, he was never able to master communication with himself. He was never able to make himself happy, even with all the success, even with a happy home life, wife, kids, even with all of that. He ends up hanging himself. Now, I know his family comes out and says, well, he had all this brain damage, and he had, well, I'm sure that that's true. He also engaged in, excessive drug use through most of his life, starting early on in his life. And, there's the question of, well, was the drug use what he needed in order to be the comedian? Well, he was funny before he started using the drugs. The drug use was his way to deal with reality because he wasn't able to communicate with himself in a way that made him feel good about who he was and what he was doing, which we look at and go, that's crazy. But we will do that to ourselves all the time. I was talking to somebody very close to me yesterday, and they were beating themselves up for something that had happened in the past. And Les Brown, a beautiful motivational speaker. If you haven't had a chance to listen to Les yet, I would encourage you to go to YouTube and find Les Brown stuff and listen to him. His story about when he first became a DJ is one of the great, fun, motivational stories to ever listen to, I think. And Les Brown says, if you punish yourself for something that you did in the past, you are prosecuting an innocent person, because you're no longer that person. You've learned lessons and you've moved on from that situation. So continuing to beat yourself up isn't going to do you any good. And in fact, you're harming yourself for no reason. It's kind of like driving down the road. If you drive down the road and all you do is look in the rearview mirror, how well are you going to do driving down the road? Are you going to be able to stay on the road, or are you going to go off the road and crash? Well, you're going to go off the road and crash. We are the ones that influence ourselves the most. Nobody talks to us more than we do. We constantly have a dialogue in our head. And if you're unsure as to how that works, it's all based upon questions. What does this mean? What do I want? If you ask questions like, why is this happening to me? Well, your brain's going to give you an answer. Your brain subconsciously will answer any question that you ask. How can I lose weight and enjoy the process? That's a quality question. How come I can never lose weight? Well, that's not a quality question because your brain's going to give you an answer like, well, because you're a pig. How can I get into great shape and inspire others? How can I, achieve these particular outcomes and inspire the way for other people? When you ask positive questions, you're going to get positive results. When you ask questions that beat yourself up, like, why does this always happen to me? How come I can never get ahead? Well, then you're going to get an answer to that. Your brain's going to give you it. Well, you're lazy, you're smart, you're not smart enough, you're not this, you're not that. Robin Williams and Jim Belushi and Chris Farley and these people are extreme examples of people who had all the success in the world, but never figured out how to make themselves happy. And then we could give you example after example after example of people who have all the reason to be incredibly upset and disappointed with what the world has given them, and yet they're happy and they're grateful for what they have. My favorite that I've personally met is the Holocaust survivor that I've talked to you about many times, Morris Price. I mean, talk about a person that's got every reason to be upset with the world and angry and hostile, but the approach is the opposite. And Viktor Frankl will tell you that the reason that he's alive most likely is because of that approach. He gave himself a reason to live, and he looked for what was good. He looked for what he could be grateful for. He looked around and said, what am I going to take out of this that's going to be something to move forward with and at least to some extent positive? And that's what he did. That's what Morris did. I have to survive because I know my sisters will survive and somebody will have to be there for them. And I have to survive so that people don't think that this didn't happen. I have to survive and tell this story. And that's what he's done. He found a reason to turn way more tragedy and suffering than any of us can probably imagine into something that he was grateful that he was able to survive. So now he gets to connect with people. And Morris, into his 90s, continues to connect with stranger after stranger after stranger to tell them that story and feel the response that he gets from that. So the number one person that you have to master communication with is yourself. And the way that you do that is the questions that you ask. That's why we talked a long time ago about morning questions. So maybe we'll leave that for tomorrow. Let's go through a series of morning questions again to ask yourself every day. But if you want some homework, think about it. What are 5, 6, 7 questions that you could ask yourself every morning that are empowering and would get your day started off on the right foot? Have a great Friday, everybody. Good morning to my Uncle Bill. Valerie, good morning to you. Detective Drahobel. Taylor, great to see you. And Miranda, great to see you guys too. You guys are up and at 'em. It's a rainy and windy morning here in northern Illinois. My 5 miles, at least half of it's going to be the wind pounding in my face. We're all in this together, everybody. Let's take care of each other.